a lot of you have probably seen right now there is a sweeping conversation going on in the superhero world that is pertaining to if you're a comic book movie fan or if you're a comic book fan, which one's true, which one's real, which one matters more, which one's the true fan, the true superhero fan. Hero, just go ahead. Just go ahead, man. It makes like I feel like I'm sweating already, dude. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
Like I'm getting hot.
In case you guys didn't see the video, and we won't name who they are, but you go look up superhero debate right now on TikTok, and I'm sure you'll find out who it is. Very popular podcast. Don't know why, but they are. And in it, they talk about how, particularly the guest of the podcast, it seems like, of this particular episode was like, I don't like, per his words, I don't like how comic book fans feel like this sense of entitlement because they know more, and it makes them feel like they are a better person or a bigger fan. And they then go on to say, like, I think that first part was definitely understandable, but then I think the part that they might have shot themselves in the foot in was they then go on to say that, hey, just because you know a lot about the character and the history of the character doesn't mean you know the character, which has now sparked a whole debate about, like Lou said, who is actually the real comic book fan. So gents, I'm going to ask you guys this question because this is something we've talked about. I know internally we've talked about this before. Do you feel like reading comic books and watching superhero movies, do you think that there is a difference in the fan base? And if it exists, what is that difference? Where can we draw that line?
So, my take on this is you can, at the end of the day, it's just a term of superhero fans. If you read comics and if you read comics, you watch the movies, you like superheroes and you like comics. If you just watch the movies or shows and don't read comics, you're a superhero fan. But you can't say you're a comic book fan if you're not reading comics. And I think it's I know not everybody has the time to read, and for the most of my life, I didn't really read a lot of comics, but I'm not gonna go around just because I started reading comics recently and getting into them a lot more over the last, like, 4 or 5 years. I don't think I'm more knowledgeable with anyone, especially with Spider-Man. There's still a lot of Spider-Man. As much as I have the tattoo and say I'm a huge Spidey fan, there's still a lot of shit I don't know about the character and storylines I haven't read. But that doesn't make me feel any better or less than somebody who does or doesn't know whatever they know about Spidey. Because at the end of the day, we're both Spider-Man fans. And I think it definitely helps when it comes to like theory crafting. But then, as we know with Secret Invasion, if you're a huge fan of Secret Invasion comics,
Ooh.
you're not going to be if you're a fan of the show after the comics. I teach their own, but two, I think that's a perfect example of people that just watch the show. They might want to go read the comic after and then realize that the comic was so much better or could have been like so much better. Then for us who have known about like Secret Invasion storyline and then getting the show, it's like, what the heck is this? Like we've been joking around about for the last like 2 to 3 years. So there is a fine line, but just my final thing is just don't be a dick about it. If you know everything about comics and you've read every single freaking main continuity storyline, just because somebody watched Black Panther and me who has never read any other Black Panther before, don't be a dick and say that I don't know Black Panther, which I mean I don't, but you don't gotta be mean about it, essentially. So the people that do that type of stuff is what annoys me when it comes to like comic fans and stuff. Because I'm willing to learn more if they want to shoot me up a storyline or recommend storylines. Recommend them, but don't be like, "Oh, you never read Black Panther? What the hell? Like, are you even a superhero fan?" Like, no, I like the freaking movie. So I have a lot of friends that are literally just straight up MCU fans and don't like most of the friends I see movies with, that I take to go see at like every premiere, or not premiere, but every showing we go to, they don't really read comics whatsoever. And they still like the movies, but just because I've been trying to like Superman, for example, last year, we've read a lot of Superman and Fantastic Four. I was always like trying to bring up like how cool like adaptations were as we watched the movie to enhance their experience. But do they care about it? Maybe, maybe not. It's just kind of there to help out a little bit. Certain storylines may not be, people may not like interpretations, but like adapted from comics. But at the end of the day, there's a fine line, and just don't be a dick about it. Essentially, just treat other fans with respect, and boom. But don't go and say all these bogus claims that if you don't read comics, you're not a superhero fan, and if you do read comics, that you are better than like every single person that doesn't or does.
Well said, by the way. Well said.
Yeah.
I don't think I can say anything any better than that, SB. I agree. Because even us, like, if you knew us from our previous life, and you're going to see if you follow along with us here, but please subscribe because we have a lot of good things coming. It's a blend, right? And we're all superhero fans. And for a lot of us, superhero, that's our mythology. That's what we find for enjoyment. That's what we lean onto when the day is tough. That's however you consume that, like the core, we can all kind of say we are superhero fans. Again, if this is a trivia game and you're just like, well, I scored higher on my tests than you, it's like, okay, like, sure. I can say from personal experience, I've gone through the MCU only, I've gone through the anime, I've gone through them all. Like, I have kind of shifted around the world of these fandoms, and there's a nasty side to all fandoms. Like, I don't care what it is. Like, there's just a gross side to it. And you're just, but again, like, if that's what you're getting, those are not your people, right? If you get turned off by that, those are not your people. People like us are your people, because even the SP's point and what we just talked about with Black Panther, if I've read more Black Panther than SB, and SB is like, this is why I like T'Challa, I'm like, boom, you got it, man. You know T'Challa. You take all the knowledge that a reader has, and I think if you like that about T'Challa, I do recommend these books to you, because you're going to get a similar feel and take that story on and just go on the ride with it. And you're just going to fall deeper and deeper in love with Wakanda and T'Challa and all the fun stuff, because there isn't another Black Panther movie right now. And I think that's the big thing for me. The MCU is so limited in scope. There's only so much that it can do. I don't care what it is. The movie only has so much time. There's only so much Thanos. There's only so much Ultron. There's only so much Cap and Iron Man. For as much Cap and Iron Man as we've gotten, to continue to live with these characters, go to your anime or animation. Oh, kind of anime. Go to your games, go to your comics, read, watch, explore all these, because there's so many great takes on these characters to fill you as the superhero fan. But I can't down with gatekeepers, man. People that are like, well, you don't understand the movie because you don't understand Superman. You didn't understand the movie because you didn't understand Batman. Oh, well, guess what, Mr. or Mrs. Whoever, I'm talking about the movie, right? That's like, that's what I'm like, that kind of stuff. I don't know. I just don't think you should turn people off. And the more we read and the more demand there is for this stuff, the better creations there's going to be. And I think right now this conversation is unnecessarily dividing people to kind of, I could be wrong, but almost give that like, oh, you can't enter, like, like no boys or girls allowed club. Like, you can't get in. Like, what's the password? And it's like, issue number 5. And they're like, you didn't read it. Can't get in here. Yeah. Or, I love, I don't know, dude, freaking Wonder Man. I spent so much dang time reading Wonder Man for no AF reason. The show was just the show, and there were some core things that carried over, but dog, the show was a show. My guy is white in the books. I'm sorry. Like, just that alone, it ain't getting the same thing. They're just differences. So again, to SP's point, don't be a dick about it, because there are entry level books. They are entry movies into the MCU. No, don't watch Civil War first. Go watch freaking Iron Man 1 first. And then let's work our way up there. It goes both ways.
Well said as well. And I think what ends up happening when these types of discussions end up popping up is that there is a certain level of nuance that I think just gets thrown out the window completely by both sides. Incredibly by both sides. Because I completely agree with you guys 100%. Don't be a jerk about these things. Like, we have to remember that there are so many entryways into the fandom of superheroes, whether it be games, whether it be movies, whether it be shows, whether it be comics. There are so many entryways. If whatever one you pick is perfectly fine, it is perfectly fine, and that is awesome. And I think more people need to be more accepting of that. That Marvel Rivals probably made you a bigger comic fan because you want to know more about certain characters that maybe don't have adaptations of shows yet.
Baseball
movies.
Pete, baby.
Exactly, you know?
Comment, I swear.
One day. Season 84.
Yeah.
But you know, like there's so many entryways. And I think more people need to accept that, especially the comic book fans, because I think they're like, if you don't read the comics, then you suck. And it's like, no, that's not how that works. It's really not, because at times, and I genuinely am a firm believer that even though comics are my preferred medium to enjoy these, it can be confusing. It can be daunting to just jump into one because you want to jump in and it's like, oh, well, issue 8 is technically out. But if you read issue 1 from like 5 years ago, that kind of doesn't work. So read issue 78 from this run. And people are like, what?
They be changing the numbers around mid runs
They
too.
do.
Like with the Fantastic Four run. I remember getting so
100%.
confused with the what was the one we did for the one with Doom, Sorcerer Doom? The Untouchable, Unthinkable. It goes from like 67 to 70 and then like 480. So it's just like, so imagine somebody seeing that and being like, I have to read so much for this storyline, and then boom, they're just turned off immediately without actually doing the research that they just changed the number system.
The thing I will say about comics, though, as someone who personally, and again, I will be the absolute first person to be like, I regretfully stepped away from comics for a very long time, and I dove headfirst into the MCU, and I can tell you the exact movie and the day and time to where I was like, what am I doing? Because I love these so much. I'm getting so deep into the MCU that I was just so blind and so jaded for so long of like, this is the peak. This is it. Everything else is garbage. And when people are like, yeah, but you know, strange this and strange that, and I'm like, it ain't the MCU, kick rocks. But when you stop and even trying to get back into it, it did feel a little intimidating to get back into comics like full time of I'm consuming it, you know, like that is my daily thing to do. And full transparency, it was more of a recent thing. I'm not even gonna lie, because the gents know. And it took me a second to even find resources to be like, where the hell do I start? Like, I know this is the character I want to read, but then you look and there's this laundry list of runs or issues or writers, and you're like, what does this even mean? And they're like,
Green
oh,
Lantern, Darkest,
right?
that whole Green Lantern, Darkest before I am butchering the name, the Darkest Night, Brightest
Blackest
Day.
Night.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
That reading order is intimidating.
But
These people with decision paralysis, it's a little tough. It's a little tough out there.
it is, but the cool thing I think, and it goes both ways, about I think it's a little bit easier and more accessible for the MCU, but for comics, there are too many people on this planet, y'all. There are good people, good resources, and good groups of people who will be like, hey, I'll take the time to just make this a little bit easier. This is probably where I recommend these are resources you can use, and you spend a little bit more time with it, like with anything, and you're like, oh, okay, makes sense. I watch soccer on freaking Saturday mornings. No clue what offsides is. No clue what that means. Why are they showing cards? Next thing you know, you get a couple buddies or friends or something. They're like, oh, yeah, this is it. And you're just like, well, that should have been a red card. That should have been this.
Yeah.
That should, like, it's with anything, y'all. It feels a little more intimidating for comics, but I think that is more of an incorrect perception than, that's the exception, not the rule. And my last thing I'll say on this, social media, I think magnifies that by a millionfold, because
Yes.
you'll be on YouTube or TikTok or Instagram, even Facebook, and you'll have the bigger people that are like, they rule the world with it. And they're like, oh, this run sucks. Like, nah, Zeb Wells this and Dan Slott that and blah, blah, blah. And you're like, I have no clue who those people are, but guess what? I'm not going to read Spider-Man. Not necessarily true, y'all. A lot of history, even though comics are still young. That's the wild thing that I just want to put out there. People make it seem like it's as old as like freaking Greece, ancient Greece. Y'all, comics started in the 30s for the most part and almost failed a gajillion times. It's not really that old. There are people who are older than comic books that are still walking this planet.
If you really want to put it in perspective, then the Marvel we know now is started in the 60s.
60s.
Like, that's not that long ago when you really want to put it into the grand scheme of things. So yeah, I think just people need to be more accepting of the newer fan that wants to try to get into these things. And I think instead of berating them, guide them, show them where to start, because that's the way people truly learn. That's how they become bigger and bigger comic fans, when you give them the more easily digestible things, when you give them the things that they can read and be like, "Ooh, I like that. What else can I like try to read that's similar to that?" Maybe it's a different character, maybe it's not, maybe it's the same character. And
Yeah.
that's cool. And we also have to remember that I think certain heroes, and then I'll get to the flip side of this conversation too, why I think the other side is negative. But certain heroes transcend comic books. SB Spider-Man, I think, has gotten so far beyond comics that like you can be a Spider-Man fan and never touch a Spider-Man book.
Yep.
Like ever in your life, and be like, I like Spider-Man. I love Spider-Man. And that's perfectly fine. And I think people need to accept that. That, like, yeah, you can be that with Spider-Man. You can be that with Batman. You can be that with Superman. Some of these characters that have had like a lot of adaptations just absolutely transcend the comic book realm. So I think to sit there and then be like, you can't accept that, I think is a little silly. And to call them lesser of a fan for it, no, absolutely not. However, in my personal opinion, and on the flip side, and where I think certain non-comic readers get a little bit too hurt about this, is that there is levels to this. There really is. Yes, if someone reads more comics than you, does that make them a bigger comic fan or a bigger fan of certain characters? Absolutely. If you liked Moon Knight, going back to that example from the MCU, cool, great, you are a Moon Knight fan. But is there bigger Moon Knight fans than you because they read the comic? Absolutely. There absolutely is. And that's okay though. That's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And the way I see it is kind of like any other thing you do in the world. Like, if you work out just to be healthy, are you going to compare yourself to a bodybuilder who does it for literal professional reasons? No, you cannot. There's levels to this. I think this is the same thing. And I think people get hurt about that sometimes. They see that and then they're like, oh, well, you just think you're better than me. And it's like, no, that's not the case at all. And I think going back into particular this clip from this podcast, that's what they're kind of inferring, is that certain people think that every comic is good, and that is just so far from the truth. I
No,
mean,
no. That's
I can tell you books of some of my favorite characters that I thought was just absolute trash.
dog
And I
walk.
can guarantee you 98% of your comic book fans can tell you certain comics of those characters are butt. So where they get that argument from, I don't know. I don't know.
I think the overall thing with that conversation too, to where I was like what? Is when you're like, you may read more, but I can know the character more. And I'm like, no. N- no, because again, this is the source. Is it a one-to-one adaptation? No. 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 However, your source is the source. If you know the source better, you may have a better shot at inferring what a writer and director and creative team is going to do for something that is live action or animated. You can probably predict a little bit more. I'm not saying that people for sure will, but on the surface level, looking at this, if I know more about a character, I'm probably going to know more about the character. And that's just kind of that simple, in my opinion.
100%. 100%. And I think people forget that. And then again, going back to that point, they get hurt about that. And then they use the gatekeeping accusation against comic book fans. And I think that's just not something you can do. For example, and I'm not going to say their name, but you look at that very same podcast and you see some things that they talk about, and you're like, where are you getting this from? And then they'll sit there and say, I've actually never read X character's comic before. You're right. I've never read anything, but I know that that XYZ. It's like, how can you sit there and say that when you haven't read that material?
And then go
You
on to
can't.
promote Marvel Unlimited.
And then go exactly, and then go on to promote the very same thing that they just don't
The
read.
most
It's
uninspiring video to ever watch that doesn't make you want to actually read comics at all.
Flip it.
no,
Flip
no. It's like there's this weird
Or get invited to a
backwards
premiere that you don't
mentality.
know the date for.
I didn't know this was coming out. Actually,
Dude,
so I don't know. It's just that weird backwards thinking of they get called out on their crap about not knowing something, and they're like, "No, I do know. Look." And then you're like, "Okay, well, did you read the actual thing?" And I'm not at this point. I'm not even talking about them. I'm talking about so many other creators who are
bro,
like, "I know about this. I'm the expert," and you're
the,
like, "Claim X it was actually shown here." Oh, I've never read that.
and that is my bigger thing with this, though, is my prime example of this, and I think you see more of this than not, especially on social media. And Marvel, I don't know why you really invite these people to your stuff, but they're out here and they're like 2 + 2 is 5. I'm going to tell you why. Let's talk about it. And I'm like, dog, it's 4. Like, it's literally 4. And they're like, no, hang on, 6, 7, 8. And everyone's like, cook. And I'm like, no, but it's just
Peak.
4. Like, why are we
Peak.
doing this? Like,
Peak.
it's just, guys, it's just 4. And they're like, you think you're better than me? And I'm like, no, I'm showing you the answer.
Are you gatekeeping? Are you really gatekeeping right now, bro? Can't believe you're calling yourself better than me, like a bigger comic fan.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
can't believe it.
yeah.
You suck.
Hey, real quick, guys. I'm gonna drop the Canon ship bomb. Cap's racist.
Yeah. Jesus Christ, man. Good God Almighty.
Huh?
Here's
But
a
again,
book disproving that. Oh, I never read that.
yeah. Well, I didn't know that one existed. Okay. That's for me where I'm like, I just think that's fundamentally the type of fans we are and the type of people that we are. Like, if we make listen, there are theories and there are wild theories and there are like, I have no support. This is just kind of how I feel, right? Do your own thing, but this is how I feel. But when I take my opinion and I want to deliver it to you as fact, that's where we're talking about. I'm like, that's not the one.
Yeah. That's the problem. That's the problem. And I think to your point, because we're all online, we are going to consume that type of content. We're going to
Sure.
consume video essays explaining characters that maybe we don't know a whole lot about. We're going to consume video essays talking about the new comics of the week. And I don't actually read it though. And again, that's okay if you want to consume it that way. That's perfectly fine. But again, there's levels to this. So if you then say something that is just wrong because you heard X content creator talk about it and I call you out, it's not the same. You can't say that. And then I think to that point too is that, like, even if you never pick up a comic and you're like, and you're okay with that fact, but then you say something that's just plain wrong and you try to base your opinion on that, but people try to widen your scope and you're just closed off because you don't want to explore that medium, I then also think that's on you. Again, Using the character that I know just most recent, Moon Knight, like I said, if you say that Moon Knight is comic accurate and someone tells you, "No, he's not," but you're like, "Yes, he is. I saw the show and I explained to you why," you cannot be upset about that.
And then that goes back to the thing with the whole thing with Black Panther. Like, when you have that and you're like, "I think you're missing a couple pieces here. Here's why." And you're not open-minded enough to be like, "Okay, maybe there is more to this character that I might have missed. I really enjoyed what I liked here, but it sounds like there's another, again, level to this character." Yeah, that stuff matters. Here, I got a question for you, specifically. I think there are 2 things, and I think this would be good for people kinda watching, because if this conversation has kind of piqued your interest to be like, "Maybe I should be reading more. I don't know kinda what's going on. Maybe I don't want to." There's 2 things that I think turn people off, and it's when people hear, "Hey, this character is," or "This is the definitive run for a character." What does that kinda mean for people? Because there's so many different people who have hands on these characters, who have tried to write them and all that kind of stuff, like even Moon Knight, for example, right? There's what, decades worth of Moon Knight, but people have kind of landed in the community on maybe the definitive run that shows, this is Moon Knight, right? Well, just talk to us a little bit about kind of like what that means for you.
I think for me, definitive does a few things. It provides a good entry point for new readers and old readers, and I think expands upon that lore in a fun way while still staying true to the character. That's, in my opinion, what definitive versions are, or definitive runs. And most of the definitive runs that people talk about do exactly that. I think about Jeff Johns on Green Lantern, how he took a very good entry point in bringing back Hal Jordan. So now you can jump on into that. And then he had this long spanning saga that did a bunch of new stuff for the character, forward the lore of Green Lanterns in that world, and then ended it in a very nice way and just did a lot of cool stuff. I think most of the time that's what you're gonna get. I think people view it as intimidating because maybe sometimes they get maybe midway into some of that, or to your point, they see a character with a lot of history, and that's it. That can be daunting to tackle. Being like, I want to read Green Lantern, but Green Lantern's been around for freaking ever. So how do I really know if I really want to start that when I see that this has this 60 issue run? Do I want to put that kind of time into it? And I think that's maybe what turns some people off about them sometimes. But I truly think when you hear people say it's a definitive or like a really good run, do your research. Do your research. Look around, ask around, really, too, because I think people will give you good answers as to if you should read it. Sometimes, again, you hear, because of social media and especially now TikTok and YouTube Shorts, and how many people actually give their opinion on stuff, you're gonna hear a lot of people say a lot of different things
Yeah.
about it. But if you start hearing it more than once, if you hear, "Hey, Jeff Johns on Green Lantern's awesome. Jeff Johns on Green Lantern's awesome," you should probably read it. Even if someone says, "Hey, I think it's overrated." Well, if it's overrated, let me see maybe why it
Why?
is, or let me come to my own conclusion.
Yeah.
Is it
Yeah.
overrated, or is it actually right up my alley and what I want in a superhero?
Yeah. Yeah. I think, just to sum that up, I mean, it's kind of like lead with curiosity, especially for these characters. And you're curious about the characters and you watch, keep going. Yeah. I think a really good example to that, and SB, just to follow up on that, how did you feel about kind of doing that for Superman, who's literally one of the longest, if not the longest standing superhero of all time, to go through and kind of explore that?
That was a great time. It made me like the movie even more and kind of just learning about the character. Even Fantastic Four, getting into them while prepping for that movie. Even Century with Thunderbolts. They all just helped me enhance the experience and oh man, a year ago today, we did that video, "Can Thunderbolts pull it off?" with The Void, because we were reading a lot of Century at the time, and doing all that research and prep was like, could they pull it off? And seeing that they actually did pull it off, phenomenal. It made it so much better. But yeah, it's definitely ooh, I'm in the change it's true change now.
Sorry, man.
And just knowing all of that and reading enhancing my experience, I liked it. I think it definitely helped. There's still a ton more Superman stuff I have to read, like Birthright and Secret Origin and Up in the Sky that I have over here that next time if I do read those and watch Superman 2025 again or any other Superman, I might pick up some other stuff that I maybe not have picked up before.
And I think to that point, I think you're such a cool example of how falling in love with a character works. Because I think even
I
before
fall in love
we,
with so many characters, it's crazy.
you do, you really do.
So easily. Or
But
not it's so many. It's just like once I do fall in love with one, I'm attached to it for a while.
You are, which is awesome though. But to your point, Superman. I remember when we did the Who is Superman, and you're just like, yeah, he's not really like my thing anymore, or he never had really been your thing up
Yeah,
until
dude,
that point.
3
And then
years
you
ago,
read him.
Brando knew nothing about Superman.
Yeah,
Literally, before we started, like when we were starting point 3 at the time, I genuinely didn't. Man of Steel and maybe one other Superman movie was the only background I had.
yeah, and you learn to fall in love with that character. And I think Rome's to your point, uh, because certain comics aren't limited in certain ways, right? I think there is certain limitations that they do have, unfortunately. But because they're not in like that same movie budget, they can let that story breathe. You fall in love with the character in so many different ways. And I think SB, again, you're the perfect example of Superman between For All Seasons, Kingdom Come. I can't remember the other stuff we read right now, but I don't know if like those would be stories you would be interested in on your own, but then you read them and you just fall in love with them. And now you gain this new appreciation for the character that you probably wouldn't have had before, and not just in the movie, but in general.
I would say Superman Red and Blue too. That one was amazing.
I always think
That
of
one
you
was
for that one. I
so
always think of
amazing.
you.
I read that on the plane to meet you guys.
Yeah.
I cooked through. I've never read a comic in one day. I mean, it was only like 260 pages, so it's not like a beefy one. But I've never went through just full straight comic in like one session like that. That was beautiful. That had me hooked the entire time.
Yeah.
That
Yeah, no.
honestly, I fell in love with it so much more with that. It's just one story that could truly make you fall in love with someone.
And the funny thing
Character.
is, you sought that one out. And I don't think either one of us had read that before.
No.
You sought that out and you recommended that to us, and which made us then really like that story too. So it's
I
just
gotta read the 2025 one that I got a couple weeks ago still. They did like
Mhm.
a new edition, or it might have been 2026. They did a new edition recently of some more stories that I picked up. I gotta get into it.
Yeah. So now you're actively seeking that out. So it's just again to that point, and that's why I think, in my opinion, comics are king. Not because they make you better, not because they give you more knowledge, but I just think they allow you to feel more. They allow you to feel more things. They allow you to really see what these characters are like outside of the limitations of what the big screen does. And I think sometimes it's just a mind shift for people that they need to do, in the sense of like, I think we, because of social media and because of the hype that the MCU had for ages, we view live action as the highest possible honor for
Yeah.
these heroes. And I think we have to get out of that mindset and be like, that doesn't necessarily mean that. I think there are so many stories that may never get a proper on screen adaptation and are better than 90% of the MCU. And I think people need to learn how to accept that and not view live action superheroes as just the be all end all. I think when we can really change that mindset, that's when people will really understand where comic book fans come from better, I think.
Yeah. And just to that point too, I think it is a generational thing. Like, even if you think about Black Panther, you could have seen Black Panther when you were 10 and now you're 18. Those are two completely different people. And at least for me growing up, like, my entry point in the superheroes wasn't comic, even though I had an older sibling who was very much in that realm, and I had family who's in that realm. For me, my love was Saturday morning cartoons. Batman, Spider-Man, Superman, Justice League, X-Men, like 90s cartoons were the thing for me that got me into it. And that got me into my first initial comic book series, and it actually happened to be with the X-Men. Probably shouldn't have been reading at that point, but it was X-Men. And I don't think you really have that now. So this whole battle between, comic book movies versus comic books, like, for me, I just think reading in general across the board, I don't care if it's a comic or not. And that's a whole different conversation of people being like, you're reading a comic book, you're not really reading. No, it's like, stop. Reading does something different and immerses you differently and expands you differently than just watching, which now most people just watch these freaking movies and shows on TikTok and stuff. Like, they're not even going to the theater.
Yeah. And that's the again, that going back to that, that's the issue that I think certain people have where it's like they see the TikTok video that X creator made and they're like, I am now an expert on Black Panther. I now know everything because I saw a 3-minute video talking about it. And you're like, no, it's just not how that works. And I think you just have to read to really understand why that is the case. Not because it's trying to make anyone better. It's really not. I just think you are able to have a different type of experience. And until you have that experience, it's lost on trying to explain it. Not because people are stupid or anything like that. No, it's just hard to explain how that connection from page to mind really is until you experience that. Until you're reading a book that you're like, "Oh my god, I never thought I would love something like this." And then you watch it and then you're like, "Oh my god, I freaking love this." I love this character. This character is now a top 5 for me. I now love them. You know, it's just very interesting, and I think to Lou's point, I think again, going back to how many gateways there are, animation's such a big one, and I think I look at X-Men 97 as another very good example of an entry point for people.
I was gonna say Rivals too, just literally adding comics to the game and then making Rivals comics. It's awesome. The amount of people that have been interested has been amazing.
Yeah, it's on like issue 30 now, and just the amount of lore that you really get out of it that goes from game to comic and comic to game, it just gives you this different appreciation sometimes. And I like I said, I think until you read it, it's really you don't get it fully. So, does reading comics make you better? No, does not make you a better fan. It might bring you to a different level of fandom, but it doesn't make you better. Just be nice about it.
But it does make you better. But it doesn't make you better.
Agreed.
Read, y'all. Read, watch, consume all of it. I mean, we'll sit here and talk about every single nook and cranny of it.